To go along with the creation of free text invoices, we also have the ability to create a template for recurring free text invoices. A recurring free text invoice is going to be used when a customer is to be billed on a recurring basis, and then when we generate these, we need to create the template, assign that to a customer, and then generate and post the recurring invoices. In this demonstration, we'll create a free text invoice template. We'll assign the template to a customer. We'll generate free text invoices from the template, and we'll post those free text invoices. Let's go ahead and create a new free text invoice template, and we're going to do that by going into accounts receivable and then into recurring invoices, free text invoice templates. I'm going to add a new one and give it a name and description. I'm going to make this rent, like we've seen already. Just rent again. The recipient information is optional. That is one of our employees who would be the recipient. The language defaults in from the customer as well. The posting profile we'd want to choose because that's how the system knows what account numbers to charge for the accounts receivable account, for example, and possibly other accounts such as the settlement account for the bank. We can put sales tax information on this as well. Being that this is rent, I'm not going to put sales tax information for item or regular sales tax. We could also put in delivery terms, various other things that are defaults. On the payment section, we can say what type of payment we're going to have, terms of payment, the currency code we're being paid for, method of payment. I'll put in a method of payment of check, for example, and payment specification, payment schedule, cash discount, if any of those apply. I'll leave those blank too and accept the defaults. What also is important for this, just to return to it for a second, is this does override what would be on the customer if we had values for it in the customer record. So if my terms of payment on the customer, for example, were net 30 days, but for the rent expense that we're going to charge them, our terms of payment are net 45, it'll use net 45. Otherwise, it's going to use whatever is on the customer record. Same thing with financial dimensions. We saw that in the previous discussion in general of free text invoices, that if I have different dimensions for this template that are different from what the defaults are on the customer, I can override it. So then in that case, if the business unit was 002 on the customer, but the rent expense goes to 003, that can override that, or I can add more dimensions as I see fit. Then in the invoice lines will be the information that I want to appear on the invoice. So I don't have to type it in every time. So I'm going to put in rent and then main account, and I'll use that account for revenue, fees that we used earlier in the previous discussion. I'm going to leave my sales tax groups blank. I'll put in the unit price for the rent, and I'll say this rental charge is going to be for $1,500. And in this case, this time I'm not going to do anything with the sales tax. I don't want it to calculate sales tax. And I can also put in invoice text that's extended text more than the description, various other things that can have to do with foreign transactions, etc., that can default into the invoice line, or lines, because we can have more than one line on here. In addition, our distribution can be, we can leave this to pick up the distribution from the just from the main account and then the default values from the customer, or we can say we want to put in more detail on this. And so as an example, I'm going to say my business unit on this one will be 2, but then I'm going to split that one also, and I'm going to say on this that my business unit is 3, and I'm going to make this 25% to one line and then 75% to the other. So then I'll see that I'll be able to have that. I won't have to do that on each individual line manually when I put this rental amount in. So I'm going to click close on this, and this should be ready to use. We also do, though, have the ability to put in additional charges and have those come through as well, as we saw on the free text invoice in the previous section. I'm just going to leave that blank just to illustrate, though, that it can be done. Now that I have a template created to use it, I have to assign it to a customer or customers. I could have one template assigned to one customer, or it could be assigned to multiple customers. So I'm going to go to the customer record, all customers, and I'm going to choose a customer that I want to assign it to. And I'm going to use that customer we looked at in the previous section, Forest Wholesales. I don't have to go into the customer record directly like this. I could have done it from the previous listing screen to put the information in that we're about to see. But I do want to check that there is invoice and delivery information that does relate to this customer that's already been entered in, and that in some cases we can override that information from the template. But we're going to go in, and so we're going to say we're going to set up the recurring invoice for this template, for this customer. So I'm going to create new here, and then I have my listing to choose from of the templates. And I'm going to say, yes, let's use the rent template that we had just put in. And then I see there's a required field highlighted in red for the billing start date. And I'm going to put that billing start date back to the first of the year. And then I could have an end date as well, but I'm going to just have it no end date. And that's a radio button that I can click to say no end date or billing end date. So I might want to do that if I intend to change the rental amount at the end of the year and then have a new amount come in for the next year. But I'm going to leave it this way. I can have a maximum cumulative amount as a limit if I want to. Have it stop creating invoices once the maximum cumulative amount is reached. I can do that. And as the note says down here, if the billing end date and the maximum cumulative amount fields are both entered, the invoice generation will stop when either of the first of those criteria is reached. In the next field, it asks us up here, generate recurring invoices by using default values from either the free text invoice template or the customer account. So if I put in the template without any overrides, I could just say, yeah, just use what's on the customer account. And in the case that I did put some overrides in. So I'm going to leave it as free text invoice. The recurrence pattern can be either daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. I'm going to say we charge them rent monthly, so I'm going to put in monthly there, and then the number of periods that it is 1. We charge them once a month. If it was only quarterly, I could put in monthly, then the periods would be 3. Down on the bottom, the activity then would be showing the next generation date. I'll say the next generation date in this case will be January 1st, 2017, which actually appeared once I hit save, and then it used the billing start date if there was nothing else in there. The previous generation date will automatically be filled in when we generate, and the previous invoice date, same thing. In this case, this hasn't been run yet, but it guarantees that if I run it twice in a period, it'll only create the invoice one time. It knows that if the previous invoice date is in the current period, then you've already entered in the invoices. So now we are ready to run our recurring invoice now that we've attached to the customer. So we're going to go over to recurring invoices, go to generate recurring invoices. Here then we see that the invoice date 1/1/2017 defaulted in from what we had in the customer itself. The generation date, if I leave it at today's date, that will generate all of the rent payments or the rent invoices in between then and now. So if I left that at 8/28/2017, it's going to generate the invoices up through the beginning of August. So I'm going to just change that back to say, no, we're going to do this. We'll imagine that we're in January still, and that this generation date is going to be January 31st. The template, then we choose our templates. We can choose any number of them. We're going to just choose the template, the rent template for this one. And the reason we might want to do that is because we may have more than one invoicing run, and the different templates will run at different times. The records to include, we can filter on customer accounts or leave all customer accounts in there. And that's what I'm going to do, is just leave them that way. And then really commonly, we might want to run this as a batch in the background and at a specified time, so we don't have to worry about it, where then the batch will be a batch job that runs on a regular basis as often as we see fit, and that it'll run, and so it doesn't require anybody to go in and run them manually. I'm not doing it in batch, obviously, for this demonstration, so I'm going to run them all right. I'm going to run this one right now and click OK. And we can see that we have a recurring invoice number 0006 was created successfully, so that did work. So now we're going to go into our post-recurring invoices to see what happened. And we see that we do have a recurring invoice created. And actually, that's a series of recurring invoices. If there was a number of them, then we would see that they would be generated. So if I were to click on this invoice number down here, it would show that we have one invoice. Note that it had no sales tax. That customer actually did default to have sales tax. Why didn't it charge sales tax? Because I told it not to when I created that recurring invoice template. And I chose to use the override. If I didn't use the override in the template and used the default from the customer, it would have charged sales tax, and that's very important. So now the final step is to post the invoice or invoices, because if we are on the screen and there's multiple invoices to post, it'll do that. The post recurring free text invoice job is added to the batch queue. So basically what I did was I put that to a batch queue, and that must have been already in there, and then this will be in the batch queue, and then it will run. So what it would do then, once the batch is run, then this would say this would be flipped to posted, and we go on from there. But no, this is a normal type of thing to do, where these types of invoices that are recurring will go into batch queues. So that covers recurring invoices, recurring free text invoices, not unlike periodic journals in general ledger and accounts payable.